A report by Equal Education has found that poor school infrastructure can affect learning outcomes and even impact attendance, for example. The group is now calling on Treasury to prioritise the infrastructure funding and ensure that money is spent correctly. Equal Education's Head of Research, Elizabeth Biney, joins us now to talk more about this report. A very good evening to you, Elizabeth. Good to have your time. I think a good place to begin, just in getting a sense of this report and what it is that you found, is to go to the depths of the problem and how you've been able to draw the link between inadequate infrastructure and poor outcomes in learning.
Good evening, and thanks for having us. This was an exploratory research to try and confirm statistically what we have suspected for a really long time, in that school infrastructure actually has some implications or impact on teaching and learning outcomes. And the main concern for us is that often when we talk about learning outcomes and ways to improve it in the country, the conversation almost always, focuses on the pedagogical interventions, such as your curriculum development, teacher training, teaching and learning materials. And while all of those important interventions are vital in addressing the learning crisis that we're experiencing in the sector, we think a neglected and a very important part of the conversation has to do with the environment within which learning and teaching happens. And so we wanted to look at this relationship using a nationally representative sample of individual or responses from the General Household Survey to see if indeed there's a relationship, and if there's a relationship, what that relationship looks like.
And how wide did you cast your net in trying to come up with some of these findings? In other words, where did you look in particular to assess the impact and the relationship between infrastructure and learning?
So we took the 2019 General Household Survey because that is the most reliable survey that has not, we can trust without the impact of COVID in the sector, obviously, and on the actual responses or outcomes. And from there, we extracted some of the questions that deal specifically with education and more specifically with schools or school conditions. And then we looked at some of the questions that looks at outcomes in terms of reading and learning literacy, teacher motivation or absenteeism, learner motivation or absenteeism, and quality of reported teaching. And then we ran some statistical modeling on those items that we extracted using statistical software to then look at the relationship. When you look at the General Household Survey, it surveys a very big segment of the population. So it gives you a really good idea of what the conditions or whatever you are testing for will be like in the real world or across the population. So it is a huge sample of over 10,000 individual responses that we analyzed.
How accurate, though, is data based on a 2019 General Household Survey, considering that was 4 years ago? And is there enough room, perhaps, to suggest that some of the issues you picked up may very well have been addressed already?
So what the rationale for using the 2019 data is because that is the most reliable data we had before the impact of COVID. And so we know COVID had its own impact on the sector and on the society as a whole. And so whatever responses we're going to get using later or more recent data might have had COVID impact on it. And so we just use that as a rationale to see what exactly is happening. But because of the way the study is done, it can be replicated using other years or survey years. So you could technically take a 2022 General Household Survey and run the same analysis, and you're most likely going to get the same results because or similar results, because you are not really manipulating things for your own good. It's right. The responses or the relationship that is there will be able to be confirmed in another survey.
And we speak a lot, as we should in South Africa, about the impact of poor infrastructure on children and their ability to learn. But in your research, you've also focused a lot on how, in fact, the lack of infrastructure may be such a hindrance to teachers that some of them don't even want to come to work.
Yes, so interestingly for us, what we found was that the school environment or the infrastructure condition does not have a direct impact on learning outcome or learning outcome as we expected. What it did show us is that it has a really direct and strong impact on teachers, their ability, their motivation to come to work, and also the reported quality of their teaching. And so, because teachers also play a really central role in the outcome of learners, we deduced that because of the relationship or the impact infrastructure has on teachers' motivation and overall outcomes, it is important for us to address it, because that in itself has an indirect impact on learners, because how teachers teach is going to affect how learners learn and eventually the subsequent outcome or performance of learners.
You also do caution that, in fact, at this point, given the extent of the problem, you say it not only infringes on some children's constitutional rights to basic education, but it may very well threaten the achievement of one of the Sustainable Development Goals, that is the right to free, equitable and quality primary and secondary education for all girls and boys.
Definitely. So, if learners are impacted and teachers are impacted by the environment that they are placed in to do the business of teaching and learning, what that then means is that for a huge segment of our population, that ideal goal of equity in education and even ability to exit the system and seek post-school education will be highly limited, and it will be a hindrance for them. So we are seeing a lot of learners in the economy that are contending against all odds to make it even to matric, to even sit the exam and, write and potentially get qualification to go to secondary school education. And so what we are saying is that if we do not address the infrastructure conditions at the very beginning, at the foundation, which is the basic education system, we might lose learners in the system through dropout or whatever means, failure, high retention rates, and these learners then will not be able to even get opportunity to go further on to train and acquire the necessary skills and knowledge to be able to contribute meaningfully to the economy. And so what we are doing indirectly is that we are delaying our target, the rate at which we are going to reach that Sustainable Development Goal 4, which is supposed to be by 2030. So we're already behind, and the likelihood of meeting that target is very questionable.
Elizabeth Biney, get to speak to you, Equal Education's Head of Research. Thank you.